Hello.
Hi Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Alan. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm happy now I'm on the inside of it. Outside.
Sorry, what? Or it's a bad
I'm
echo.
happier in the inside of this. Trying to get into it was a bit of a challenge.
Good evening to you, Alan, and good morning to you, Matt. How are you?
Doing very well, Christy. How are you?
Good, yeah. Thanks for joining us this evening. I think we'll just give it a couple of minutes for some folks to come and join us if they wish to do so, and then we can crack on with some discussion.
Sounds good.
Is anyone drinking anything nice, or are you all fatigued with lockdown booze?
No, I've just poured an Isle of Barley 2009. So yeah, I have at the end of the day for me, so I can enjoy a dram.
Nice.
I just finished my first cup of coffee, so it's very different. Yeah.
Good for you. Cool. Well, I'll just start off because this is pre-recorded, so there may be some people that are watching it back, and whenever folks join us, they can come in and ask some questions. And so if anyone is watching at home, feel free to just add some questions into the chat box on the right-hand side, and I'll try and pitch them to Alan and Matt as we're going through the session. So welcome to the Whisky Show's virtual extravaganza. It's been quite a few days of sessions and booths. I know we've both been, Bruichladdich and Westland have both had stuff on over the last week, so I hope everyone's been enjoying that. I'd like to just start the session, first of all, by each of you introducing yourself. So Allan, you're obviously Production Director at Bruichladdich Distillery, and Matt, you're the co-founder and Managing Director of Westland. But can you tell us how you started? Maybe Allan, you want to go first, and what you're kind of responsible for now?
Yeah, sure, Christy. Yeah, thank you. So I started with Bruichladdich in 2001, January 2001. So it's almost 19 years since almost 20 years. Sorry, it is definitely 19, but it's almost 20 years since I started with Bruichladdich. And when I started at the distillery, I was taken on as almost like an apprentice, a rookie distiller, no experience. Started under the watchful eye of Jim and Duncan, and I was, having grown up on the island, my father worked in the Freud, having grown up on the island, it was in my kind of my blood, my uncles, my grandfather, everybody in my family had one way or another had been connected with the whisky industry. So I was very keen to get into it, but it was difficult with no experience. And just by good fortune, when Bruichladdich reopened in 2001, I got the opportunity to start, as I say, as a rookie. Jim took me on, and that was the start. And then I've worked my way through the business, worked in every aspect of the business, and you know, being part of a small independent startup business allowed you to get more involved with different aspects of the business and learn a lot. So I learned a lot and managed to progress up to the ranks. And today I'm production director. When Jim retired in 2015, I took over the reins of running the Isle operation. So that's me today.
And is it correct, Allan, that you were once the youngest distillery manager in Scotland, or have I made that up?
Yeah, I think at the time, it's probably changed now. I mean, at the time, there wasn't as many of the startup distilleries as there is today, and you know, I'm sure that title has kind of changed. But at the time, it was thought that I was made the distillery manager at the age of 27, and we thought that I was probably the youngest on record that within the industry, certainly in Scotland at that time, to be given that responsibility. But I'm guessing that's probably changed now. Given that I'm only 28, then
you wish.
Yeah.
You wish. And Matt, tell us about your start. So you founded Westland at the age of 21. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So so I, as Christy said, co-founder at Westland. So when we started, I mean, my big passion, I came in on the product side, like Allan. So I'm definitely a product person, first and foremost. The whole reason for starting a whiskey distillery is being really interested in the origin of flavor in whiskey is super appealing to me. You know, I love the history and I love the tradition of it. I went to Scotland back 10 years ago. Went back to Scotland, and I remember going to Bruichladdich for the first time. Absolutely fell in love with the place, fell in love with what they were trying to do, and being evocative of Islay. But at the same time, we are not trying to be an Islay distillery or a Scottish distillery. We wanted to represent our home here in Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. And that was the big takeaway, actually, from going to visit Bruichladdich, was be true to ourselves and make our own path here. So I had gone through study at the Institute of Brewing and Distilling in London, and then through the Harriet Watt program that a lot of people in this business have, postgrad program in brewing distilling science. We started Westland, and I was just on the production operations side. Eventually took over managing the whole business, as Christy said, now managing director of the business, but still kind of my heart is always in product, and I feel like I kind of manage Westland from that perspective. I'm still very much, you can't pull me out of making whiskey. I still love to be involved with it. So now, for the most part, it's more like future forward stuff, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit of that today.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, just from my point of view, hanging out with both of you guys, so I work for Bruichladdich Distillery, but obviously we're all under one kind of parent company of Rémy Cointreau now. So Bruichladdich was sold to Rémy Cointreau in 2012. And Westland, when did you guys come under the umbrella? Was it 5 years ago, or have I made that up?
It'll be 4 years in January.
Right. Okay. So I'm slightly overdoing it there, but I think that is one of the great things about each of the distilleries that are within Rémy Cointreau. Obviously, with Allan at the helm in Bruichladdich and you at the helm in Westland, because you've come up from that grassroots level, you are able to see exactly what the business needs. I mean, Allan, you must find that the boys in your distillery will be exactly the same. Like, go away, Allan, I know how to do this now, and you kind of want to get involved. So how hard is it to kind of let go and let your teams manage things, having been so involved in that area?
Yeah, I think over the last couple of years, I think starting to learn about that. I think obviously Adam, who I work very closely with, and Adam runs the day-to-day of the distilling, so try not to interfere too much. But as Matt says, it's hard to let go, and you've always got an interest and always trying to make suggestions, ideas, and it's just keeping. It's important to stay connected to it, and it's not something that I don't think we'll ever let go. It's the backbone in the business, so you're always going to be connected to the production, but it's just trying to obviously let the guys do their job without too much interference, but still what my job's kind of moved on to is making sure that the business is first and foremost is setting everything up to make sure that the business operates correctly, so we have everything we need, but then making sure it's fit for purpose for the future. So topping and tailing, you're basically looking at making sure that everything's set up for it to operate in the way it is, but you're also looking to the future to make sure that things are happening so that everything keeps going smoothly. So it's still, you still need to be involved in what goes on in the middle, but just probably arm's length. I think the guys would probably happily. Sometimes, when you're around and asking questions, they're a bit thinking that you're interfering, but
Possibly.
Yeah.
So some of that future focused stuff we will come on to talk a bit more about, and I'll probe into a little bit. But obviously, having come from independent backgrounds before we became part of our larger business, how do you think that's your respective distilleries? Matt, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I've only known this business. We started Westland, it'll actually be 10 years next week. So 10 years ago. And so this is all I know. So I don't know any other way to operate. And it was very clear that we have a path and a vision of what we're trying to accomplish. We are pretty singular when it comes to what we're doing. I mean, first of all, the fact that we're making single malt in America is already a huge deviation from what is expected. That takes a certain streak of independence. But even within the category, what we're trying to do as far as really be provenance driven and explore things like local barley varietals or local oak species and stuff like that. That is what special about Westland, in my opinion. So that's something that, again, we admire that of Bruichladdich, because that's Bruichladdich definitely carves its own path within the Scottish whiskey industry, and that was frankly one of the most important things about joining Remy Cointreau, was seeing that Bruichladdich is still doing all the cool stuff that they were known for doing before, and that streak of independence gets to continue. And that that was a really important point for us in order to join the group, to join the Remy Cointreau group. So we've kept that going, and Remy Cointreau has been super supportive of that. They love that about us, that we're entrepreneurial companies, creating the future of whiskey, both Westland and Bruichladdich.
Yeah, it's still independently minded. I'm sure
Absolutely.
that much of us would say if we were having a drink all together, that and that is a massive benefit of, we are part of a bigger business now, but got slightly deeper pockets. We can invest in projects that we really want to. And not sure it was quite the same for you, Matt, but I'm sure, Alan, you felt in the early days you would have been around when it was literally a white knuckle ride. We couldn't afford to do anything. So tell us about the early days of Bruichladdich and how that shaped the business even now, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's slightly different because as Matt says, they started up in 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, where Bruichladdich had existed since 1881, so it had some history. I think 2001 was a new start, a new chapter for Bruichladdich. It was taken over by a new company who, the shareholders, but had a new vision and certainly were more passionate about what they wanted to do, as opposed to, in the olden days, back before Bruichladdich had been mothballed in 1994. It was part of a multinational whiskey company who were producing whiskey, but predominantly producing whiskey for blended malt, and a small amount going to single malt. But the first thing that was identical, when I started with the business in 2001, didn't really know a lot about whiskey. I've grown up in the whiskey industry, but didn't know about products and marketing and stuff. Knew more about distillation and production, but started to learn very quickly that the first pledge that the owners had made at the time was that we're only ever going to sell 100% single malt. We're not selling any whiskey for blend, and that set a tone that basically we're going to be focused on quality and not quantity. So we weren't going to be trying to make mass production, running the distillery to its knees, trying to run it really hard. It was going to be making small amounts but focused on quality. And then to do that, I think with the background of the owners, some of them coming from the wine industry, and Jim coming from Bowmore and coming from an era where he started his career in 1964 and seen the industry change, and this was his one-shot opportunity of bringing back some of the tradition and some of the focus back into the raw ingredients, and being able to focus on quality, on flavour. And I think that was what was really special about Bruichladdich back then, was that we had a vision that was somewhat different to the rest of the industry. And it was scary, as you say. It was a bit of a white knuckle ride. The first few years was, well, certainly for the first 10 years at least, was all about survival. It was literally hand to mouth. We were basically running by the seat of our pants most of the time, but it was amazing what we achieved, and I think it was led by the passion for making great whiskey, being innovative, being creative, and being transparent. And all these things were set out. These were the visions in the beginning, but it wasn't as easy just to say, right, okay, this is what we're doing, let's get on with it. We had to turn the tide. We had to it's like turning a big ship round, because there was no precedent of this in the industry of what we were trying to do. So to get closer to the ingredients, we had to build relationships, forge relationships with farmers, which we'll probably talk about in a little while, but also to be creative. We had to start thinking of outside the box with very little backing, no money. So it was hard at times, when you're sometimes having to do things in a way that was more difficult than it would be necessarily today. But it was fun to learn from it, and we could build experience. And yeah, I mean, It's certainly, over the 20 years, I've seen it change, but we still reminisce that these were the days, the early days were the days that made this company who they are today.
Yeah.
Because basically we had that vision and we stuck to it. We've never faltered in our vision. We've never kind of said, well, that didn't work, so we'll go and try something different. We've always stuck to it and stuck to our values. And as Matt says, that's the great thing about when we joined Remy Cointreau in 2012. Many people thought that would change, that the big companies buying a small independent, that they're going to micromanage them, they're going to change the way that they run the business. We'll lose our independence. We'll lose. But actually, it's the opposite. They've supported it. They've allowed us to continue to have our independence. We run the business here from Isla. We make the decisions here on Isla of what we're doing, and get the support of a bigger company. So it's been great for us. It's been a win-win in terms of getting that backing and allowing to take Bruichladdich to the next level that we were challenged to do in the early days.
Yeah, and just so you touched on there, Allan, that kind of the decisions were made in the early days, but Scotch has changed a huge amount in the last 20 years. Matt, you obviously started off as an American single malt whiskey. Have you seen that category even globally flourish somewhat?
Yeah, definitely. You can say that. When we started the business, we weren't the first distillery to make American single malt, but I am pretty sure that we were the first distillery to write American single malt whiskey on the label and call it as such. I was always confused when some other distillers are making American single malt, or single malt period, and they weren't calling it single malt because they were making single malt. So, when we started this company, there's no definition for single malt. And as we've grown, there is a huge amount of interest in making single malt in this country. We created a formal definition for American single malt, like you'd have for bourbon or for Scotch whiskey, for that matter. That would make sure the words on the label mean something. And there are more than, now at last count, 170 distilleries producing some amount of single malt whiskey in this country. There's like 2,000 distilleries in this country. It's a big place. But it's more than 170 distilleries that are on board with this group that we call the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission. So there's probably more out there that aren't even joined up with us yet. So that's a big movement. This idea of American single malt and what we can do, because everybody's starting fresh. There is no history and tradition of single malt whiskey in this country, whether it's for Westland or for anybody else. And so that allows everybody to kind of interpret it in their own way. And this is a very American, idea here, is that, there isn't a lot of ties back to the old world of the way things were done. So everything is a reinterpretation. So there are some distilleries that are, being very conservative, and they're making what would amount to be a pretty close, copy of Scottish whiskey with some local twists. And then you have us, so we've kind of dived all the way down into the other end, and we're sourcing 80 plus, actually next year it'll be 95% of our barley from Washington State, our home state, and really trying to make something that is very different from Scottish single malt. But the beauty of the category and as it's growing is that there's room for everybody to do different things. People can lean into their local terroir, their local provenance. People can try to be more conservative, more traditional. And that's kind of what you see that's why there's a lot of enthusiasm in the category, is just because of the broad diversity of how people are approaching it.
Interesting when you touch on there about the percentage of your barley that's coming from Washington State. I think it's becoming more and more of a topic in the industry about where your ingredients come from, and probably especially in Japan at the moment, with the fact that they're about to bring out some new regulations because they're kind of finding that it's not regulated enough. I always find it interesting, Matt, that when I queried you once on, does all your barley come from Washington State, or what about taking malt from somewhere else? Because I think, do you buy in some of your peated malt, or you did at some point?
We do,
and you always,
but we are...
That's about quality, not about locality. But I like to balance that there, where, even for us on the Bruichladdich distillery side, it's kind of, we source 52% locally, grown on the island. But apart from that, it's about quality, it's about Scottish, and it's about local. So how do you balance those two things between local and quality? And
Well, quality is paramount. I mean, you can be as local as you want, but if it doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter, in my opinion. There's a lot of people who don't actually believe that. There's a lot of people who want to be local for the sake of being local, and I don't believe that. I believe that our job, first and foremost, as a distillery, is to make a good whiskey, and if we can do it with local ingredients, that's great for the local economy. But if you can do it with local ingredients because the local ingredients create something special, that's where you're really hitting on something that's really, really important. So for us, when we started, it was 80% of the barley used comes from Washington State. The only stuff that didn't was stuff that either wasn't produced in Washington State or we didn't want that version that was produced in Washington State. So the vast majority of that was the peated malt. And again, there's definitely nothing wrong with the quality of peated malt coming from Scotland. It's amazing. In fact, we're sourcing from Baird's, same place as Bruichladdich is to get some of their peating done. But we've been working in the background on developing our own peated malts, and we've been working with a local malting company, Skagit Valley Malting, to create peated malts. And we had this idea in the beginning back in 2011, but no malting company in America had ever produced peated malt. To the best of my knowledge, peated malt has never been produced commercially in the United States before. So it took us 5 years worth of kind of research and development, working with them to get that going and to make sure that we could commit to this, right? I mean, again, even if we could use this local peat, 2016, we started using it. We didn't just say, oh, we're not going to use Scottish peated malt anymore, because we need to be able to say, this is going to be good. We're going to count on this going forward. We've actually kind of just made that decision that we're going to be going with 100% Washington State peated malt, at least in the short term, because we have a lot of confidence in it. So it's all about quality first and foremost.
And that peated malt, sorry, I will come on to you in a second, Alan, but that peated malt that you've created in Washington State, is that, have you just brought that out in the Outpost range?
Yeah, so we've just announced it. So we just announced it in the Outpost range. So we've been making the whiskey. So it was January of 2016 we laid down the first cask. So coming up on 5 years ago. Crazy. So yeah, we just announced this new range of whiskeys that we call the Outpost range. Now, one of those whiskeys is something some people will be familiar with, Gariana, which we've moved into this Outpost range. It was a standalone product. We've kind of added 2 new whiskeys, Colere, which is a barley varietal focused whiskey, and Solum, which is the whiskey that you're referencing, Christy. That's one that's focused on the Washington State peat. That's still a couple years out, but we are feeling confident enough, obviously, to be able to announce that it's coming. We just need a couple more years to kind of build up stock, so that once we release it, we can release some consistently every year. So yeah, we're pretty excited about it, for sure. We get questions about it all the time.
That's a clever plan, that you're announcing it 2 years before it even hits the market, and then it'll sell out as soon as it gets there.
Yeah, I mean, but it's part of the problem, frankly, is that it's not a secret. Like, we're super transparent about what we do, and we keep talking about this project. We keep talking about this local peat project. People have known about it for a long time. So in many ways, announcing it just helps to kind of quash the rumor mill and just get people to understand exactly what's happening and when it's coming out. So as we said, like, it's a couple of years away. So announcing it, but also making it very clear that it's not going to be ready tomorrow, as much as we'd like to say that. So at least we can control the narrative, I guess. There's just so much like enthusiasm about it. People talk about it all the time. So we might as well tell the truth about when this whiskey is coming out. So that's our perspective.
Cool, very exciting. We'll mark that in the calendar for the years to come. Okay, so sticking a bit with locale, Alan, how much would you say the location of Islay, so Bruichladdich being established on Islay and being a kind of Islay single malt, has influenced our philosophies, or Bruichladdich Distilleries' philosophy as a company?
Yeah, I think you could look at that in so many different ways. So obviously whiskey making in Islay has been around for centuries, and there's a lot of history with making whiskey on Islay. I think in terms of what drives our philosophy and what it means to us making whiskey at Bruichladdich on Islay is, I think over the last 20 years is informing this business and we often refer to like what we're doing at Bruichladdich as a bit for like a project, because it's always developing, it's always progressing, and it seems like there's always work to be done. And I think for us, it's we've built something more meaningful. I think round Ireland, building a business on Ireland, we've created it. From the beginning, the vision was that this is our HQ. Here at the distillery. Why wouldn't we bottle whiskey on Islay, create more jobs? But it also means that we do all the process at the distillery, maturing everything we do 100% here on Islay as well, making sure that everything stays local. And it makes sense for us if we're making whiskey here on Islay to be maturing it here 100%. You get the influence of Islay for itself, but also it's securing and creating jobs. And it means that then we can justify bottling it here as well. So we've built this up over the year, and we've built it up to be the biggest employer on the island. We've also, created many indirect jobs, whether it's through transport companies within the community, and really putting something back into Islay. And then going beyond that, you mentioned there that we're taking 52% of our barley from Islay, so we've now got 21 local farms growing barley for us, which didn't exist in 2001. So we've created that market for the local farmers to grow barley and sell it to the distillery and get a source of income. And it means that we get local barley, locally grown barley, which is great for us. So there's been lots of things over the years that's evolved that just naturally make sense. And I don't think we've reinvented the wheel. I think we've just kind of went back to things that are more logical to run a business for us. And it's not about trying to make maximum profit out of everything we do. It's about what's right and what feels right. And obviously we've got to make money. We've got to survive. But I think there's a balance there you can strike, and balancing the community and people over profit, and trying to do the right thing for the long term, make it more sustainable, because we want to build up a business. We certainly, I'm local, I'm born and bred here on Islay, and I want to make sure that everything that we can do here to make sure that this business is still fit for purpose and still doing everything that we want to do and more for generations to come. We don't want it to rationalise it and change it, so we want to make sure that it's fit for purpose and keeping jobs local and keep working with local farmers and keep trying to give back to the community. I think for us, and we get the benefit of working with local farmers, because we get close to them, we get understanding of their challenges, but we also get more understanding of the options they have, whether it's varietals, whether what they're doing with their land management, different things that we have an influence as distillers to try and work with them to create options for ourselves that maybe has an influence on the flavour of whiskey. So for us, it's a win-win, and I would only see it value. And I think I've spoken to many people in the industry that run or work in the whiskey industry, and they often say, "Is that not a pain in the ass?" Doing all that. And sorry, I don't know if I should be swearing, but a lot of people say, and I say no, it's really actually rewarding, really enjoyable. And actually, I couldn't imagine making whiskey without having these relationships with the growers and actually having that connection with the barley that we use. I couldn't imagine it. If it was just a commodity that came, I think life would be pretty dull.
Easy and but dull.
Yeah.
And so obviously that Islay's a massive influence to who Bruichladdich are at the moment, and obviously what you're saying here is Bruichladdich gives back to the community.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, the one thing I hadn't mentioned I was going to go back to the roots, is that I think what Bruichladdich also has done is that Islay is renowned for making smoky whiskies. It always has been, like the reputation Islay has. If you talk about the well-known established brands that are making whiskey in Islay, they're referred to as the big smoky ones. You've got Ardbeg, you've got Freud, you've got Lagavulin, Bowmore, Killala, and Bruichladdich is slightly different. Okay, yes, Bunnahabhain is lightly peated, but Bruichladdich is unpeated, and that was, for us, it was, like we were the kind of the black sheep of the Islay family, not having the the unpeated version. But what we've done is we've used an initiative to then create peated whiskies and actually really kind of push the boundaries and not just stick with one style of whiskey from one distillery. We've started to move that, and I think albeit we make 3 different peating levels, but we've got about 15 different spirit types that we're distilling because we can do that. We have the freedom to do that, and we know that by really, so we are obviously, we do make and sell peated single malt, but we still make unpeated. But again, there's different expressions, and I think, albeit we're not, I think it's probably gone off piece here a little bit because we're not, what we did want to do is make a heavily peated whiskey that was more a nod to our past as opposed to getting in line with the rest of the industry, because the rest of the whiskey distilleries in Ireland, because we believe there's no factual evidence or no written evidence that Bruichladdich once was peated, but putting all the clues together would suggest that Bruichladdich up until 1960s was a heavily peated single malt. Now we don't know what phenol content was, but I think going back to that, and I think that was interesting, that allowed us to go back to that. We could go back and use the same equipment and create a whiskey that was made in the pre 1960s. That kind of style of whiskey that was probably in line with the rest of the whiskey that's made in Ireland today.
Yeah, it's quite interesting how we call ourselves progressive Hebridean distillers, but ironically we're sort of very traditional in our methods, and we try to be quite progressive with our attitudes. Although ironically, local is also a kind of age-old attitude. So I was going to ask before about the obviously we're very rooted in community. What future projects have we got coming up that that help to solidify that and kind of make us even more Islay or even more community oriented? Can you share any kind of?
We've there's a number of different projects that we're working on. As I say, Bruichladdich for the last 20 years has almost been like an ongoing project that we keep moving forward. And like I was saying earlier on as well, that my job is to try and make sure that the business is fit for purpose, and we've been had this vision of keeping everything on Islay, trying to create jobs, sure the jobs are secure. And we the last probably 5 years have been more focused on making sure, well, 5 to 10 years really, making sure that everything we have here is future proof, that we have enough warehousing capacity to be able to keep maturing the whiskey here, and then we have enough bottling capacity to keep bottling everything that we make here. And we've been working on that, and then we've reached a point now where we're pretty confident with that everything's in good shape, and we've now reached a point where we're starting to really set the vision for the next 10 years. And what we want to do at Bruichladdich, it's always been part of the dream, and it's been the missing jigsaw for us, is that every part of the process that we do here on Islay, the missing part of the jigsaw has been the malting, that we've never managed to malt on site. And we've worked with Bears Maltings in Inverness, who have been great partners since 2002. And we wouldn't have half the whiskies, these 15 spirit types. They wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for working with Bears, who have been so accommodating. But it's also been somewhat, some of the ambitions we've had, or the ideas we've had, have been were restricted because Bears maybe either don't have the capacity or have the willingness to maybe do some of the radical things that we want to do. And for us, even just from the fact that we're working with barley that is grown in Islay, there's 52% of what we're growing is what we use every year is grown on Ireland. And for us, having to ship that to Inverness to have it malted and back, it's not very environmentally friendly. But it also means that if we could malt that barley at the distillery, then it's just basically, it's all staying local, and everything we're self-sufficient in our process of certainly the 52% that we make, and then through time, we will have a little bit more additional capacity that we can import barley from the mainland. But yeah, so we're working on the designing our own maltings on site, so that's part of our kind of 5-year vision. We've also bought some land that surrounds the distillery. We got the opportunity in 2018 to buy the land right about it. So it's agricultural land, and we're not going to use that land for development. We're going to use that land, put it back into agriculture. It's not really been farmed for the last probably 5 to 10 years. But we want to regenerate that land and put it back into farming and actually use it for R&D, for research and development, for trying to work with our partner farmers to take some risks that, whether it's working with different varietals, farming practices to try and to improve the soil fertility, with taking some risks that sometimes farmers, because they have so much at stake, it's their livelihood we're playing with if we're asking them to take big gambles. So we want to be able to do that ourselves and use it for more research and development, and we want to even explore further with some of the varieties, and having all this set up is going to give us, being able to do more research. Having our own maltings is then going to work together, because we'll have the croft working, the land that's we're going to be working and creating different parcels of barley, and then should they be a success, then we can then take it to malting, and then it allows us to then take it forward to distilling. So that's going to be one of the advantages, and it means we're allowing to progress and fulfill our dream. It also means that we'll be able to then start to explore further with the peat, and that we've been limited to what we can do with bears. We have worked with Islay growing peat, so we've been sending Islay peat to bears for malting, but it's quite big batch sizes that they're making, so therefore you need a lot of peat, and therefore you end up with large quantities. But we want to be able to do smaller quantities and more variations, so that we can start to explore the nuances, the terroir of peat, which is going to be quite exciting. So yeah, we're really excited about that. And I think the croft is also going to be, useful for us to start to build a community around agriculture research and development, and looking, hopefully trying to educate and bring more people in to start thinking about more possibilities of what we could use our land for, rather than just barley. Because we want to create better farming systems, so that rotations are not just barley and grass. We want to be able to look at new things, and well, I say new things that have already been growing, but there's no market for it today. So we want to be able to try and use that land to demonstrate that these things can still grow. And if
we rebuild it, Alan, they'll come.
yeah, absolutely.
We just have to create the demand for it.
Yeah.
So inside on Islay, we've got maltings, we've got warehousing, we've got croft land. So you're set, you're future proofing. Matt, what's happening in the Pacific Northwest? How's your location impacted your business, and how are you giving back, and what's your future projects?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with this, as far as the influence goes, Westland has always just been about trying to express this place. And we see that that's a two-part equation. That is a combination of the agriculture and the things that grow here, but it's also us and our culture. America is a big, complicated place. I think, as everybody is fully aware at the moment. But the west coast of the U.S. and the Pacific Northwest in particular is a very innovative place. I mean, it's one of the most recently developed parts of America. It's the most recent developed parts of America. And the culture here is super entrepreneurial, super innovative. A lot of startups happen here, a lot of fresh thinking, new ideas. And that's a part of Westland. And we didn't, it's funny, like when we started this company, we didn't mean for that to be expressed in our whiskey, but it did. The fact that we started straight away with, using roasted malt, which weren't commonly used in the whiskey industry, or brewer's yeast. These are influences from the craft beer culture, which started here in the Northwest. But it was also just this kind of feeling of, why can't we do this? And that's really key. I mean, that's what Westland is all about, is embracing that natural feeling of saying, what does the future hold? And why can't we do it this way? We don't have there is no history and tradition here, so there's nothing to fall back on. We don't have an old distillery from the 1800s. We have in many ways, we have no choice. So, that's been with us since the beginning. Literally since the first cask we made was a huge deviation away from what the traditions are, I think, in this business. But beyond that, the thing about that spirit is, like, it doesn't stop, so you can't just shut that off. You don't start the business and say, we're innovative, and then you're done. And then you don't ever innovate again. It's a constant source of energy for us. 40% of the whiskey that we put into barrels this last year is whiskey that has never been produced by anybody before, like different barley varietals, the local peat, different versions of our Gariana oak. That's a massive percentage in terms of, like, risk and really kind of future-facing stuff. But that's who we are, as a company, is dedicated to that. So we've done a lot of work. Actually, a lot of work is pretty similar to how Allan was describing it for Bruichladdich. Again, we think very similarly. That's why we're sister distilleries. We think very similarly. One of the big things that we have, which is a benefit to us, is that there's a really strong craft malting community here in the U.S. and particularly in the Pacific Northwest. We've got some great partners that can help us achieve the things that we want. So when it comes to, like, the local peat, the big maltsters wouldn't do it. We asked politely, but they wouldn't make peated malt. They didn't have, to be fair, some of them don't have the capability to even smoke barley with peat, because, again, it's never been done before. Yeah. But a lot of the upstart malting companies, that's, they're able to do the more innovative stuff, to do different barley varietals. We've been focused on that as well. 20 different barley varietals that we've done here. You cannot get that out of the commodity system. But beyond that, so we've got the maltsters here, but there's a really big step here. They're researching, again, like Allan mentioned, researching what is the future. We've committed to fully funding research in barley agriculture and developing new varieties specifically. And this is super exciting. This is the type of barley agriculture that we're looking for is post-commodity agriculture. I don't know if there's a name for it, maybe there is, but the type of agriculture that provides barley to the whiskey system, the whiskey industry, we are creating a new version of that. Not all alone, of course, but, like, we're participating in this kind of new agricultural economy. And so one of there are three things actually that we look for. One is to make sure that the farmers can grow it and earn a living. Like Allan said, you need the farmers to be on board. The farmers need to be able to earn a living growing these crops. So the big thing is, you might have the best tasting barley in the world, and you might have, certified organic or whatever it is, but the farmer can't make any money growing the crop. It doesn't work, frankly. So that's the big one. Second one is looking at new varieties for flavor, not conformity. And the third one is to be grown in low impact agricultural systems. So regenerative agriculture, certified organic. We have another system here called Salmon Safe. Salmon, the keystone species here that protects salmon habitat. So that's the baseline. So in all the commodity agriculture barley research exists in the US, none of those things are targets. Sustainability is not a target. Flavor is not a target. Economic viability for the farmer is not a target. So this is all completely new. And because of that, there's no public funding for it because it kind of goes against the big agricultural system. So we've completely funded this program, a 4-year program of PhD student research to develop these new barley varietals, not GMO, just traditional barley breeding, which is pretty big. So we're working with that student and the Bread Lab. It's called the Washington State University Bread Lab. It's part of this grain research hub, which has become quite famous within culinary circles in the US because they've departed from the commodity system as well. So we have that. And then like Bruichladdich, again, we think very similarly on a lot of things. You get to this point where you go, in order to fully explore the closest connection to provenance of terroir we can get, we need to be involved in the agriculture. And so like Bruichladdich, we have also purchased a farm. This is a 80-acre farm, but probably only about 60 acres of it is farmable. We are going to be growing barley on that farm next year, which is very, very exciting for the first time. When I say we, I mean we're with the help of a farmer who actually knows what they're doing. Yeah, exactly. But that's also where the research for this barley research is going to happen. It's going to happen on our property as well. So we'll be testing these kind of 4-foot by 8-foot test plots, finding these new barley varietals. So we're going to be doing all of that. It's all going to be certified organic, which is going to be pretty cool. And that's, like Allan said, all of this is designed not just for us, but for the larger community. None of what we want to do, both distilleries, I think, is none of this is achievable without partners. And for us, when we're saying to a farmer, we want you to plant this red barley variety. A lot of people don't know this, but like barley can be red, it can be black, it can be purple. They've never seen a red barley before in their lives, and they're going to go, "You're crazy. Why would I plant this?" And so a lot of what we want to do with this property is to be able to grow it out. First of all, develop these varieties so they can grow in these systems, but then kind of absorb some of the risk from the farmers, to be able to take the risk off of the farmer and say, you know what, if you want to deviate from the commodity system, if you want to grow this red variety of barley, we're going to test it on our property first, absorb that risk, and then we'll learn from it, and all the farmers in the valley can learn from it as well. And then the farmer can grow that with a lot more confidence, knowing exactly how it's going to work and how it's going to grow. So that's the kind of big long-term vision for that property. And it's kind of, to us, that's the future of how we interact with agriculture. So super exciting. It's a long-term program, but whiskey's a long-term business. So
yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting how we're all becoming farmers now. Allan,
farmers, yes, exactly.
We every other distillery on Islay started as a farm and turned into a distillery, and we're a distillery that's going back to being farmers. But so important that that concept of taking on the risk and giving that proof of concept and that proof that it can work to the farmer in order for it to roll out. How much, Matt, do you think the ecosystem kind of grew up around you? Was it always a challenge? Like, did Skagit Valley Maltings come online the more that you guys had business for them? Did the Bread Lab have a connection there? Like, how do you literally grow a whole ecosystem up around
great question.
You guys used to that in the Pacific Northwest?
We are fortunate. Again, all of this stuff is new for all of us, right? I mean, there's been malting in America for a long time, but there hasn't been a system for malting related to whiskey and related to hyper-specific agricultural regions before. It's all commodity agriculture that supported it. So we started our business 10 years ago. Skagit Valley Malting, who's one of our main partners, not the only one, but one of our main partners, they started their business 10 years ago as well. And in fact, in 2012, we basically kind of found the limits of what the commodity system would provide. So we went up to meet with the Bread Lab, which started in 2008, this kind of post-commodity grain researching institute as part of Washington State University. And it kind of, we kind of all came together at the same time. And Dr. Steve Jones, who leads that Bread Lab, he kind of left / was kicked out of the commodity agricultural system in 2008. And so we kind of all found each other right at this time. And, as this was happening, the reason why Skagit Valley Malting was started was because the farmers approached Dr. Steve Jones and said, hey, we need to grow barley for our soil. Our kind of agriculture is very different from how it is on Islay. Barley there's 80 different crops grown in the Skagit Valley, we're one of our agricultural regions. Barley is the least valuable crop, literally the 80th most valuable crop at commodity prices. But they need to grow it for the health of their soil. barley puts, for an acre of barley, you get 3 tons of barley to the acre out here that we take to the malters, but it puts 8 tons of organic matter, of carbon, back into the ground. So they need to do this in order to plant their more lucrative rotation crops. So it was the farmers coming together and saying, hey, we need to grow this barley, but we need to make some money on it in a non-feed environment, in a malting environment. So that came together. Skagit Valley Malting was actually founded by the neighbor of Dr. Steve Jones. And then we all kind of got together in 2012 and we started working together. I mean, Skagit Valley Malting, I saw it when they were a machine in a garage, a 50-gallon drum machine. And so it's quite serendipitous in a way, but it also just kind of speaks again to this kind of Pacific Northwest ethos and this attitude, right? There is a thing here, there is a culture here of innovation and not being afraid to just go for it and try something new. And that's, none of this, we could have the grandest dreams in the world, but without partners who can support it, who have the same vision and are just as passionate about malting as we are about making whiskey, or just as passionate about farming as we are about making whiskey, none of that is possible. And we've grown up together, and that requires a lot of trust that we're doing this together. I mean, that's so important. So, like you were saying, Christy, not only are we going back to, distilleries were farms, they became distilleries, and then the farming part went away. And now we're both distilleries are kind of going distilleries back to farming, but it's also back to community. Now, Bruichladdich is way out ahead of this, right? Bruichladdich has been talking about community forever, but in the general whiskey space, in the agriculture space, the whole point of commodity agriculture is that you don't need a community. You don't need to know who you're selling the grain to. You don't need to know the farmer or anything like that. So we're undoing all of that work. And so trust and community and honesty, all that becomes vitally important.
Well, hopefully that's the way the world's going now. I mean, it only takes a bit of a crisis for everyone to look around what is in their local community, and they start to kind of, I wouldn't say recess back into, but you end up having to look for the things at home that are going to support you, because that's not always going to be accessible to you. So it's a funny point. I can just imagine you, Matt, with Steve sitting around drinking a beer and being like, yeah, we should do this. This is a great idea. Let's just go and do it. I love that attitude of like, it doesn't matter if it does fail, let's just go and do it. But recently, Allan, I was up at Cool Farm with one of our barley farmers, so Andrew Jones, who grows for Bruichladdich, and he told me that the kind of how it came about that Andrew ended up growing rye for Bruichladdich was you and he on a Coast Guard practice. So it was like, even with the Isla community, the two of you going out and doing that additional thing in your community, that kind of extracurricular, that was the moment where you guys started talking about, let's grow rye at Cool Farm and let's distill it at Bruichladdich. So how important is Isla on that kind of really close-knit community to, to the ideas process? Do you think it makes a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think what we're finding now is, there's more appetite for diversification. I think farmers are willing to try more. I suppose a bit of a contradictory is that we've also got a generational gap where you've got young people like Andrew who are very keen and entrepreneurial and looking to try new things, and looking to diversify where they can. So like for years, Andrew's dad had farmed just livestock, and they grew some barley, but it was all for feed. And then they've obviously started growing malting barley for us now. And Andrew's taken over the farm. He's probably in his early 30s, but he's now taken over the running of the farm and looking really to what else can we do with the land that it will help you and help us. And these are the conversations. And I think, certainly we're finding there's more appetite now, even not just outside of agriculture. I think more people are coming with either business ideas or want to be connected, because we are community spirited. It's maybe people come and say, like, we've had this idea and, can we partner with Bruichladdich, or would you like to get involved with us and support us in this? And certainly think because of our long-standing kind of commitment in the community, where we are seen to be more of a I don't know what word I would use for it, but we're certainly what word am I looking for, Christy? I'm trying to think. Sorry, I've lots of words here, but I think, yeah, certainly in the community, a lot of people will, certainly come to us and with ideas. Within the farming community, we've got great support now, great relationships, and it's not. We don't see them as suppliers; we see them more as partners. They work with us, and it's things like James Brown, who grows barley for us, who also supplies us with spring water for reducing our whiskies, and also we support him in terms of when he's marketing his Highland beef. We'll use that produce, and Hunter Jackson is. We support him, and there's lots of different outgoings with the farmers that are they're doing different things that we support them with. So yeah, it all works hand in hand, and we'll support local where we can. And as Matt was saying earlier, I think there's something special about like local. The quality of what you have in your doorstep is amazing, and people I think are starting to appreciate it more. But I think the more you can let people taste and introduce the quality of the thing, there's far more appreciation for it. But I think the commodity system, the supermarkets, everything challenges that at the moment, and I think but people are opening their eyes a lot more. I think through even this pandemic, people have been supporting the local fishermen. The fishermen can't export their catch to Europe, which would normally go to, which is it seems crazy that they're catching seafood just out there, and then it all goes in a truck and goes to France and Spain. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure they have coastlines too, don't they?
yeah. So I think now people are more aware of that, and they think, oh, we can buy that directly off the fishermen, and and it's the best food that you'll get, and even supporting local small businesses, whether it be brewery, the small startups. It's the way things are heading, I think.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure it's very bright for both the local communities of Bruichladdich and Westland. So, and definitely with the distilleries at the heart of it. We're about to run out of time. That's why I'm not helpful with the language, Allan. I'm conscious that we're about to get kicked off. If you could describe in just a minute, where you want the Scotch or the American single malt industry to go, and where you want that progress. I know that's a real challenge within a minute, but Matt, tell me, where do you want to see us in 10 years' time?
Well, I think the first thing for American single malt, we're hopeful we can get that standard of identity, the formal definition, to get that finished. Now that's been submitted to the federal government. Hopefully that can happen within the next year. So that's big. But I think I just want to see the momentum keep going, and people embracing the different nuance within the category and embracing the possibility that exists. I mean, America is geographically and culturally as diverse as it gets. And so to me, the most compelling whiskeys are reflective of place. This is why Westland and Bruichladdich are doing what we're doing. So I hope to see more of that out of the category, and I hope to see more people, especially from outside of the US, everybody in the UK who's watching, to try those and see what American single malt has to offer compared to Scottish single malt. Not as a better or worse, as just an addition to the kind of global stage of single malt.
Perfect. Allan, where do you want to see it?
Well, I don't think. There's the Scotch whisky industry is doing a great job. I'm sure. Sorry, the lights keep going out here.
See a wee desk going on over
there. Sorry.
Very good energy.
Wave my hand. It's now going out. Yeah. We need to put Budgie back on the treadmill. Budgie running on the treadmill that keeps the power going. I think the Scotch whisky industry is doing a great job. I think certainly, I think there's a big focus on. There's going to be, a future on sustainability, on energy, on trying to improve our carbon footprint. I think everybody will naturally go on that journey, but I think we've already started at Bruichladdich. We're certainly keen to progress with a greener future in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, and hopefully more will follow. Certainly important that we all do, but I think there's something that if I could wish that there'd be other that other distilleries would maybe start to, and you see it more and more with the new startups, but hopefully some of the bigger companies will start to think about, things that matter, local community, and, trying to, support the local farmers, because it is, we work with more farmers. I'm going to go over a minute, but who cares? We work with farmers. Yeah, we work with farmers right across the country. So we have 21 in Islay, but then we have, direct relationships with about another 9 or 10 on the Scottish mainland. They're bigger farms, but we work with them, and they've worked with the big, kind of, the commodity supply chain, and I think they find it more rewarding, knowing where the produce goes. And I think hopefully more of the industry will open up to that and trying to kind of build connection and give the farmers more reward, because I think the farmers in Scotland need that, and they need that stability of market. Whereas if each year farmers are not sure if the market price is going to crash, and therefore they're always trying to weigh up risk and reward, and whether they're going to get left with all their barley because the market prices in Europe or in England is lower, so therefore it's been imported, and they're left with. So I think hopefully people will start to recognise the importance of what the farmers do, and the farmers will be more rewarded for that. That's a wish more than anything else.
Yeah, so we need the industry to take more responsibility, and we need more of the consumers to demand that responsibility from the producers, I think.
Yeah.
So just to close off, we have this session recorded, so once we can get that on the kind of exhibitor stands, I see that some people are joining in, you'll be able to watch that back for an hour, and hopefully we'll get a copy of it. So you join Bruichladdich mailing list, and perhaps Matt will do the same. We'll send out links to it later on. Mike, I hope your question's been answered from Allan on the Islay peat, that we're not currently using Islay peat. We have experimented with it, but in the future with our own maltings, we will likely do that again. We'll experiment with that again. And the last one from Aaron Krause is, have either distillery ever considered doing their own floor maltings? So I know, Allan, just to answer for you, because you'll go over a minute again, is we'll have Saladin boxes, or at least that's the plan at the moment. So not exactly floor maltings, but when we put ones in. Matt, do you want to give us a quick shout on your floor maltings, not floor maltings?
Yeah, no floor maltings for us. Floor maltings are they're inefficient from a malting perspective. So from a malting technique version, we're all about future-facing stuff. So working with Scattered Valley Malting, all of that is drum maltings, and it's all self-contained drum maltings, which also lowers the carbon footprint and the water footprint. But we don't really need to take a lot of that stuff in-house, because we've got these great partners who will do this. I mean, literally last week I was up there talking to Scattered Valley Malting, talking about malting a mixed variety of different types of barleys all together in the same drum. They said, yeah, we can do that. It's a very collaborative process, and a very process to have them say, yes, we can do this. So this is fortunately something that we don't really need, because we've got great partners.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't always need to do it yourself. Like on Islay, we're doing it because it makes sense. It doesn't exist. We have to do it ourselves. But if you can find it in your community and you've got people that are willing to help you out, absolutely. That's the whole collaboration makes the world go round. Thank you both for your time this evening. You've been absolute stars answering all our questions. I'll leave you, Allan, to probably your dinner now. And Matt, I'm sure you've got a busy working day ahead of you. So thanks again for joining us. And
thank you, Christy.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. And thanks everybody who's watching.
Yeah, likewise.
Yep, thank you at home for joining in. Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.